You moved different this morning. Not faster, not louder, different. The world still wore its usual mask, traffic breathing, screens blinking, obligations rehearsing their lines, but something under the surface changed its key. The door handle felt lighter. The mirror blinked first. Even your coffee cooled slower, as if heat was listening. You didn't announce anything. No speech, no vow. You simply stood inside your body like a verdict, and the room recalibrated around it. Power never begins with trumpets. It begins with posture, with the way your shoulders stopped apologizing, with the way your eyes chose horizon instead of history, with the way your breath refused the old panic and made a home in the quiet between heartbeats. That's what the universe hears. Alignment. And alignment is louder than any prayer. It's the frequency of a decision that will not be renegotiated. You carried that frequency into hallways, into screens, into the narrow mouths of other people's expectations. Watch how doors responded. Watch how delays forgot your name. Watch how small talk turned into answers you needed. You didn't demand respect. Gravity issued a memo. You weren't performing confidence. You deleted permission as a category. They'll say it's coincidence. That's adorable. Coincidence is what skeptics call choreography. When they hear music too complex for their feet. You feel the tempo now, the subtle click, when choices line up like teeth on a key. Call it destiny if you want. Call it discipline if you're honest. Call it the consequence of not betraying yourself before breakfast. Old triggers tried their tricks. They arrived on schedule, the message designed to hook your doubt. The detour shaped like yesterday. The voice that bargains for the smaller life. None survived contact. You didn't argue. You outgrew. Even your silence had edges. It carved through noise like a blade wrapped in velvet, leaving only what mattered in the room. Morning is a rumor factory. Today, it printed a different headline. You are not available for collapse. You are not returning to battle with yourself. You are done paying tax to fear for roads you no longer travel. The universe noticed because the universe keeps receipts. When your steps match your story, reality stops being random and starts becoming responsive. Feel that hum behind the ordinary. That's the field answering back. Crosswalks timing themselves to your stride. Emails arriving at the moment of least resistance. The right face appearing in the right doorway with the sentence you needed most. You didn't conjure miracles. You removed interference. The current was always flowing. You finally stepped out of your own way. This is the shift. Not a louder you, a truer one. Not a new map, a cleaner compass. Keep walking like that verdict. Keep choosing like the future has been briefed. Let the world adjust. Let people wonder. Let timing apologize for being late. Morning was watching. So was everything else. Something tilted in the unseen architecture the moment you opened your eyes. The air didn't rush. It waited. Patterns rearranged themselves, pretending nothing happened. But silence was busy whispering your name through every atom that remembered what obedience felt like. You became alignment, and alignment bends physics. The universe listens, but not to words. It listens to coherence, the way your heartbeat agrees with your ambition. The way your breath no longer argues with your purpose. That soundless rhythm pulls reality toward it like gravity on its best day. You moved with that rhythm this morning, And so the current shifted. The sky stretched wider. Data rerouted. People you haven't met yet felt the echo in their chest and didn't know why they paused mid-sentence. Nothing about you screamed for attention. The power of resonance never yells. It hums. It hums so deep that noise can't compete. That's why everything external seems louder. They raise the volume when they sense the signal. They call it coincidence, energy, intuition. It's just synchronization wearing different masks. Even the resistance noticed. Algorithms lagged for a second. Clocks hesitated between ticks. The forces that profit from confusion felt the outage. Because when you stop fighting yourself, their chaos business loses funding. You didn't meditate your way out of pain. You organized it. You folded your scars into geometry. And now even light studies your outline. This is the kind of morning legends never mention, because they can't describe it without sounding unreal. But reality keeps records. It logged the exact nanosecond you stopped needing validation. The cosmic audit filed it under irreversible momentum. And from that line onward, life began conspiring to keep you consistent with that version. Don't question it. The human mind calls miracles what mathematics calls alignment. You're not lucky. You're finally legible to the algorithm that writes outcomes. Keep moving like the equation already balanced, because it has. Every time a soul begins to align, interference wakes up. It's the static that tests signal strength, the whispers that try to convince you the shift was imagined, the familiar voices that sound like comfort, but carry code written by your past. That's how the system guards itself, by making you doubt your own evolution. You moved different this morning, and the world noticed, but so did the noise. Old cycles began sending decoys, little inconveniences dressed as random, a delay, a message left on read, a thought from 3 years ago that slipped through the back door of your mind. It's not sabotage, it's calibration. The universe wants to see if your new frequency can hold under pressure. Can you stay aligned when nostalgia flirts? When fear sneaks in wearing logic's face? This is where new realities prove their architecture. You'll feel it as friction, but that's confirmation. The old grid is losing grip. The patterns that once defined you are dissolving under the weight of your awareness. Watch them crumble politely. You don't need to argue with ghosts. Just observe their confusion when their tricks stop working. Doubt used to own real estate inside your head. Today it's a tenant whose lease expired. People around you may sense it before you explain it. They'll say you seem quieter, distant, unreachable. They don't know silence became your firewall. You've stopped broadcasting vulnerability to receivers that only translate it into gossip. You no longer explain energy to those who measure worth in volume. That calm they misinterpret as arrogance, that's control. The interference will push once more before it fades. It will throw memories like darts, hoping to pierce attention. But your focus is a shield forged in patience. The test isn't about staying positive, it's about staying present. The old world feeds on reaction. The new one responds through intention. Let them send static. You've learned to tune into frequencies that can't be jammed. Let them misread your stillness. It's not surrender, it's signal precision. Every attempt to shake you only proves the shift is real. Because noise doesn't chase silence unless it's losing power. By midday, the current was undeniable. The atmosphere adjusted itself around you like fabric learning a new shape. conversations bent toward relevance. Random faces mirrored fragments of your new rhythm without understanding why. That's what alignment does. It makes the ordinary perform miracles quietly. You move through streets that remembered you differently. Pavement had memory now. Every step rewrote code. The universe isn't watching you, it's reading you. Every gesture, every pause, every boundary you finally enforce becomes data. It translates self-respect into gravitational commands. Energy follows pattern, and your pattern just evolved beyond predictability. The algorithms of fate have been forced to recalculate because your silence no longer matches their forecast. You are the glitch that turned into guidance. Even resistance started taking notes. The same forces that mocked your calm are now studying it. They want to decode how you survived storms without bitterness, how you kept building when collapse looked easier, but they'll never find the equation, because it isn't in words, it's in frequency. You changed your emotional signature, and physics took attendance around you. People feel it before they understand it. They adjust their tone, their pace, their sentences. The air becomes participatory. You've entered that rare alignment where coincidence retires and synchronicity signs the paperwork. Doors open, not because of luck, but because space recognizes you as authorized. This is the unseen part of ascension, where the universe stops being metaphor and starts behaving like memory. Even your reflection hesitates, as if studying an upgraded version. You notice it too. Your thoughts no longer spiral, they orbit. Your emotions no longer overflow, they inform. Your vision no longer seeks permission. It simply knows, and that knowing hums through every interaction, every glance, every breath. This is the phase most can't explain. They call it intuition, destiny, divine timing. You just call it consistency. The morning's decision didn't end, it expanded. You're now watching reality observe you back. And the moment that happens, creation shifts from random to responsive. By afternoon, the proof began to surface. Not in fireworks, not in applause, in patterns, in the subtle choreography of timing that only the awake can see. You thought of someone, and their message arrived. You adjusted your schedule, and traffic parted, like intention itself had clearance. That's how confirmation appears. Ordinary events edited by invisible intelligence. Every system you interact with responds to energy, not effort. You've become efficient in silence. That's why outcomes arrive smoother. The universe didn't start favoring you. It finally started matching you, because it can only reflect what you broadcast. Your signal's cleaner now, less fear, more focus, less performing, more becoming. You stopped demanding proof, and reality started sending it anyway. Notice how the noise gets quieter when you stop chasing validation. That's not luck, it's feedback. The code listens. The moment you believe fully, the grid of coincidence activates. You're in that zone now, where manifestation looks like magic to those who never paid attention to math. They see results and call it impossible. But nothing impossible ever felt this familiar. People who once questioned you begin to hesitate before they speak. They sense the recalibration. Their words can't land because your frequency no longer provides landing strips for projection. That's not arrogance, it's upgrade. You've moved into a wavelength where authenticity filters everything. False connections dissolve without drama. True ones glow quietly. You don't need to announce growth. It leaks through posture, through pauses that hold entire philosophies, through eye contact that feels like mirror therapy, through responses that weigh more in silence than paragraphs ever could. The confirmation doesn't come in signs from the sky. It comes in how peace feels when chaos tries to knock. Every step today has been a handshake between will and universe. Each small decision, a code instruction. That's why outcomes chase you now. You've stopped contradicting yourself. Alignment makes everything move on schedule, even miracles. By evening, the pattern could no longer pretend to be random. You saw it everywhere, in the way lights flickered as you passed, in how the right thought arrived seconds before it was needed, in how even silence felt orchestrated. The realization came quietly. This isn't luck, it's language. You've been speaking to the universe fluently, without knowing it, and now it's responding in full sentences. The energy that once ignored you now bends in acknowledgement. Every decision that came from peace has become magnetic. Your detachment turned into power because it signaled trust, and trust rewrites probability. You no longer chase, you calibrate. That's why everything started to chase you, because alignment is the rarest frequency. And the rarest frequency always becomes the new center of gravity. People around you feel it but can't name it. They study you like a puzzle. Some admire, some envy. Most misunderstand. They think you changed. They don't realize you simply stopped contradicting yourself. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions finally sign the same contract, the universe signs too. That's why doors open before you knock. That's why resistance bows before it bites. You've become coherence incarnate. You no longer pray for signs. Your existence is the sign. Every breath, every boundary, every silence you hold, instead of filling, becomes a ripple of proof. The old version of you needed validation. This one needs direction, and direction is exactly what destiny provides when you stop asking for permission to arrive. The realization hits deeper than motivation. It's recognition. You remember who you were before fear taught you manners. You remember that your energy always had authority. It just needed discipline. That discipline now speaks louder than any speech ever could. Reality isn't reacting to you, it's obeying you. Because truth doesn't shout, it vibrates. And when it vibrates steady enough, the entire field harmonizes to match. Tonight, as the world resets its equations around your new frequency, know this: you're not manifesting anymore. You're maintaining command. Once realization settles, reality begins to echo back. You walk into rooms and they shift tone before you speak. People stare longer. Not out of judgment, but confusion. They can feel the calibration. Something in you now hums above language, and the world is trying to translate it. It's not fame, not aura, not mysticism. It's alignment. And alignment is louder than charisma. You've entered a frequency that doesn't require defense. The moment you stopped explaining yourself, clarity started explaining for you. You see it in eyes that drop mid-sentence, in tension that dissolves when you step closer. You're carrying coherence, something most souls haven't heard in years. And because they can't name it, they project it as power. They'll ask if you changed routines, if you found something new. Smile gently. They wouldn't understand that peace is a technology, and you just updated its firmware. That's what happens when chaos finally gets bored of you. It leaves quietly, taking the old version of your identity with it. You didn't level up for applause, you did it for equilibrium. But balance itself now speaks your name. Notice how conversations shorten, how manipulation stutters, how distractions dissolve. That's not isolation, it's insulation. The universe removes interference when signal strength reaches threshold. You used to chase attention. Now attention follows you home like gravity returning to its source. Even opportunities sense the pattern. Messages arrive cleaner. Synchronicities multiply. The right people find you, without search terms. You stopped asking for direction, because direction now orbits you. Every step you take builds trust between reality and destiny, and that trust becomes infrastructure. This is the part where old allies fade, not because of betrayal but mismatch. They'll say you changed, but what they mean is you healed in ways they weren't ready to witness. Don't shrink to reassure them. Your growth is not arrogance, it's accuracy. You've become fluent in the language of inevitability, and everyone else is still learning pronunciation. When alignment deepens, separation begins. Not as punishment, but as precision. You start noticing the quiet exits, people drifting without closure, plans dissolving, habits losing flavor. It's not rejection, it's refinement. The frequency that fits your future cannot tolerate noise disguised as loyalty. Every departure is an audit. Every silence is a graduation. You'll be tempted to chase what's leaving, to re-explain your heart in language's evolution. No longer speaks, don't. The higher path demands lighter luggage. Let the echoes fade. They once mirrored who you were, not who you've become. You are no longer someone who argues for your worth. You embody it, and embodiment terrifies the parts of the world still addicted to pretending. The separation is lonely, yes, but only at first. What feels like emptiness is space being cleared for precision. Old cycles collapse out of respect for what can't fit. The people who misunderstood your silence will call it arrogance. Those who understood it will call it arrival. Let them both speak. The truth doesn't need defense. It needs distance. Even time starts acting differently here. Minutes stretch like reverence. Hours compress like realization. You start living outside linear sequence. Synchronicity replaces schedule. That's what happens when you stop chasing meaning and start radiating it. The universe no longer measures you by activity. It measures you by alignment, and alignment has its own calendar. You'll notice your vocabulary shrinking. You stop saying hope because it implies doubt. You stop saying someday because it implies delay. The new language is simple. Now, the word enough becomes your anthem. The word peace becomes your currency. You're not cutting ties, you're cutting static. And once the static fades, what remains is signal. This is the separation not from people, but from permission. The moment you realize you never needed it, gravity itself begins to shift allegiance. After separation comes the merge, the moment where silence meets purpose and sparks recognition. Everything you've released begins returning in upgraded forms. People with clearer intentions, opportunities that fit your evolution, moments that no longer feel like accidents. What you once chased now navigates by your signal. The frequency that used to isolate you has become invitation. It starts subtly. The right message at the right second. The way strangers speak lines that answer questions you never asked aloud. The universe has always been fluent in pattern. It just waited until your noise reduced enough to translate. Now you're fluent too. Every heartbeat feels coded with direction. Every pause feels sacred. You no longer seek signs because life itself is a conversation, and you've finally stopped interrupting it. The connection is not mystical, it's mechanical. You've achieved resonance, the exact ratio where intention and environment hum in the same pitch. Destiny doesn't need to shout, because you've become quiet enough to hear it. The ideas arrive easier. The timing lands cleaner. The path reveals itself one alignment at a time. You're no longer forcing outcomes. You're co-authoring equations. People feel it in your presence. Their nervous systems borrow your calm. Their fears momentarily forget themselves. That's the real power, not dominance, but coherence. You've stopped leaking energy into resistance, and the universe rewards efficiency. Now, reality bends because you no longer break. This connection will test humility. It's easy to confuse alignment with superiority. Remember, stars don't shine by competing. They shine by existing at full voltage. Your task isn't to prove light, it's to maintain it. Keep walking with that quiet certainty. Keep speaking with that precision that makes silence sound articulate. You are no longer searching for meaning. Meaning is orbiting you, waiting for instruction. Every movement, every thought, every act of patience is a new law of gravity being written in your name. And then, it happens. The rarest phase of transformation, stillness. The moment where you stop chasing signals and start becoming one. The air no longer feels reactive, it feels loyal. Every breath enters like an agreement. Every exhale signs a treaty with peace. Nothing is missing. Nothing is forced. Everything unfolds as if the script of reality finally caught up to your vibration. Stillness is not silence. It's control disguised as calm. It's the frequency beneath every victory, the pause between power moves. You realize now that motion was never the proof of progress. Presence is. This is where warriors retire their armor and scholars close their books because understanding has turned into embodiment. You no longer seek knowledge. You are the knowledge that others are searching for. The universe, once distant and mysterious, now moves like a mirror following your breath. It reflects your steadiness in outcomes, your clarity in opportunities, your restraint in chaos. Even storms hesitate before approaching you. That's how balance announces itself. Not through perfection, but through unshakable rhythm. People will think you've vanished. They won't see you online as much. You'll answer slower, speak less, smile differently. They'll call it isolation. It's not. It's integration. The new frequency demands silence to solidify. You've stopped proving evolution and started living it. And in that quiet, the world bends closer, waiting to hear what you'll decide next. This is not the end of your story. It's the calibration before the next wave. The stillness is how power rests, how wisdom breathes, how legacy prepares its next form. The universe doesn't whisper to everyone, but when it does, it chooses the ones who've learned to listen through noise. You're one of them. So remain still, not because you've stopped moving, but because the entire field now moves with you. Hello, my dear masterminds. They called them the Masters of Control. 12 figures chosen from across kingdoms, empires, hidden orders. Each one a name, whispered in fear. a presence that could bend the will of crowds, silence the voices of challengers, and shatter the strongest minds without lifting a single edge. They were the chess players of nations, the shadow behind thrones, the engineers of obedience. For decades they had dictated the pulse of humanity. Kings carried forces, but these 12 carried silence sharper than edges. And when they entered a room, certainty followed. People said, "Nothing escapes them. Nothing resists them. Nothing survives their mastery." And yet, today they had been gathered for one purpose, one test: to face you. The chamber was vast, carved in stone meant to hold judgment. Torches lined the walls, their flames steady against the still air. Around the table sat rulers who believed control was their currency, their fortress, their god. They had summoned the 12 to finish what no advisor, no council, no system had managed: to define you, to bend you, to crush you. The rulers leaned back in confidence. If anyone could end your legend, it was them. One by one, the masters entered. The first carried the air of a surgeon, precision in every glance. The second moved like a serpent, silent but suffocating. The third bore the smile of a saint and the heart of intent. The fourth was a general, his eyes scarred by 1,000 campaigns. The fifth walked with the pride of a scholar, weighed down by books no one else could read. The sixth was a mystic, presence wrapped in smoke. The seventh, a judge, stone-eyed and unyielding. The eighth, a merchant whose empire was built on broken wills. The ninth, a prophet of control, his voice steady as iron. The 10th, a strategist who had never lost. The 11th, a priest who chained belief to obedience. And the 12th, the most feared, moved with no sound at all, as though silence itself had followed into the chamber. 12 figures, 12 masters, 12 embodiments of control itself. The rulers smiled, reassured. They believed no presence, no silence, no force could withstand such assembly. And then you entered. No army, no symbol, no claim, just presence. The torches flickered as if the air itself shifted to acknowledge you. You took no throne. You raised no hand. You simply stood. And the 12 turned their gaze. For the first time, the masters felt something they could not categorize. Stillness that bent the room. Silence that pressed against their breath. It was not resistance. It was not defiance. It was simply being. And in that being, the seeds of unraveling had already been planted. The chamber waited, rulers leaning forward, with anticipation. The 12 masters adjusting their posture, preparing to dismantle what they assumed was ordinary. Yet as the first master prepared to speak, his hand faltered, a tremor, small but undeniable. The others noticed. They exchanged glances, and though not a single word had been spoken, the game had already begun, and none of them controlled it. The rulers leaned forward in their chairs, certain they were about to witness your undoing. 12 masters, 12 unmatched forces of manipulation, gathered like edges circling prey. Each one believed they had been born for this moment. They carried the arrogance of years spent bending crowds into silence, turning challengers into obedience, turning gatherings into cattle with only a gesture. They saw you as another figure to be filed into their catalog of victories. And so, Their confidence filled the chamber like smoke. The first master, the surgeon of minds, smirked as he adjusted his gloves. He had dismantled dissenters with words sharper than steel. He studied you as if preparing for unveiling, certain he would peel back your layers until only weakness remained. The second, the serpent, coiled in silence, her gaze piercing like venom. She had wrapped entire councils in her coils, suffocating their will until they forgot their own names. She smiled faintly, convinced that soon you would gasp for air. The third master, the saint with the edge heart, clasped his hands as if in prayer, whispering the words of false compassion he had used to enslave thousands. The fourth, the judge, leaned heavy on his staff, ready to pronounce his verdict as law, certain no one could stand against it. The eighth, the merchant, stroked his beard, recalling empires built from broken men who had sold themselves under his contracts. The ninth, the prophet of control, hummed the rhythm that had enslaved nations, a chant that stripped people of their will. The 10th, the strategist, scribbled invisible lines across the floor, already imagining the map of your downfall. The 11th, the priest, clutched a book of rituals meant to bind the spirit. And the 12th, the silent one, remained motionless, his aura so heavy it pulled the air downward, as if gravity itself obeyed him. Together, they exuded a certainty that pressed against the walls. Their eyes gleamed, their lips curled into knowing smiles. They believed they were inevitable. They believed control was the highest law, and they were its keepers. Around them, the rulers nodded, reassured. Now, they thought, now the legend will be broken. Now silence will be bent. Now the game will return to our hands. But as the 12 prepared their assault, as their mastery unfurled like instruments in the dark, none of them noticed that the torches along the walls had begun to flicker. None of them saw the shadow bend not toward them, but away from you. None of them felt the tremor in the air, the subtle reminder that presence is heavier than control. They mistook silence for emptiness. They mistook stillness for weakness. And in that mistake, the cracks had already begun. The masters of control thought they were entering a proving ground, but they had walked into a truth they could not command. The chamber was silent, but thick with expectation. The rulers leaned forward, eager to watch the dismantling. The 12 had faced kings, prophets, leaders, thinkers, challengers, and every kind of rival. None had ever resisted them. None had ever left their grip unbroken. So when the first master stepped forward, confidence echoed in every stride. He was the surgeon of minds, the dissector of will. His reputation was built on precision. He believed he could unravel you as easily as splitting a thread. He began as he always had. His words flowed with rhythm, designed to slice into thought. He described your silence as a mask, your presence as a strategy, your power as illusion. He crafted syllables like scalpels, confident that each one would peel away the layers until your truth lay bare, helpless before the council. His voice filled the chamber, sharp, steady, authoritative. The rulers nodded, reassured. This was the mastery they trusted. But then something happened. Midway through a sentence, his voice caught. It was small at first, a stumble over a word he had spoken 1,000 times. He cleared his throat, forced the sound again, but it cracked. Thin and fragile, his hand twitched, the scalpel of his language slipping. He tried to adjust, but the rhythm was gone. He repeated himself once, twice, as though circling words that refused to open. The rulers frowned. The other masters exchanged glances. The surgeon pressed harder, raising his tone, layering words on words, desperate to regain control. But the more he spoke, the heavier the silence around you grew. His syllables, once sharp, now blunted against it. The serpent stepped in, where the surgeon failed. She moved without sound, her gaze a coil that had bound 100 counsels. She believed she did not need words. She believed breath itself could be a leash. She circled you, measuring the distance like a constrictor studying a pulse. The rulers leaned forward, relieved to see control restored to hands that had never trembled. The serpent had ended challengers by teaching breath to forget its rhythm. She exhaled once, slow and deliberate, the way she had always done before a tightening, but her breath did not reach you. It folded back into her face, hot, uncertain. She tried again, faster now, and the coil cinched inward around herself. Her shoulders locked. The room watched as her poise turned to stiffness, as if she had misjudged where the center of gravity lived. Her control refused to cross the space. It found her voice instead. She coughed once, twice, then stepped back with a smile that split at the edges. The serpent had learned a new law. Presence is not prey. The saint with the edge heart drifted forward next, palms together. Voice sweet, he had bound thousands with gentleness, made obedience taste like mercy. His trick was simple. Call surrender virtue, call chains blessings. He began to praise you, a net of compliments designed to bind. He spoke of humility, of the wisdom of listening to guidance, of the safety found beneath authority. The chamber softened at his tone. Even the torches seemed to glow warmer. Then his smile flickered. Praise relied on elevation and lowering at once, and elevation requires a platform. His words searched for ground under you and found only sky. He tried to lower you into the shape of a student and discovered there was no downward slope. His compliments fell through open air. The edge heart cut its bearer. Even the torches seemed to glow warmer. Then his smile flickered. Praise relied on elevation and lowering at once, and elevation requires a platform. His words searched for ground under you and found only sky. He tried to lower you into the shape of a student and discovered there was no downward slope. His compliments fell through open air. The edge heart turned inward on its owner. The saint's eyes watered with a sting he could not control. He bowed out, hands still pressed, fingers white. The general tapped his cane twice and advanced. Campaigns had taught him to read wind and will. He imagined you a fortress. He imagined approaches and angles. He placed invisible regiments in your shadow and planned a siege. His voice mapped gates and weak points. The choreography of victory, the slow patience of wearing stone into sand. He described the day you would fall. The room steadied under his competence, until the map refused to stay still. The lines he drew curved back upon themselves like rivers that forgot their slope. The gates he named moved 3 inches to the left without moving at all. Siege ladders shortened by a rung that wasn't missing. The general paused. His mind had never struggled to measure distance. Today, distance misbehaved. He ordered an advance that should have reached by morning and watched it arrive yesterday, empty-handed. He stood there, lost in a geometry that no longer obeyed him. "The horizon is wrong," he murmured, and sat down as if time had pulled the chair from beneath him. The scholar approached with confidence that smelled of old paper and unbroken argument. He opened his book of control, pages inked with the grammar of obedience, definitions that enslave, axioms that herd. He read a theorem loud enough to hang its frame on the air. It bent. He chose another, older, and the ink blurred a little as if embarrassed to be seen. He threw a proof that had humbled savants and watched it arrive as a question mark. The scholar did not believe in miracles. He believed in rules. But when rules treat presence like weather, they become umbrellas in a sea. His hands shook. He closed the book and discovered it had been closed before his fingers moved. He blamed his age, then blamed the lighting, then blamed the ink. The truth hummed through the grain of the table. Knowledge that wants control forgets what knowing is for. The mystic let smoke curl from her mouth and traced a sigil that had never failed her. She spoke names that bent doors. She set a bowl of water and asked it to remember. The bowl reflected a ceiling that wasn't there. She set a stone upon the table and asked it to choose heaviness. It hovered half a thought above wood, not rising, not resting, unsure whose command to honor. She looked at you and saw not shape but permission, the absence of which turned her rights into gestures anyone could mimic. She whispered a fear she had never allowed herself. "I am not the one speaking when I speak," the fear answered, and it did not sound like you. It sounded like silence that had befriended her gifts for years and now declined the invitation to perform. She extinguished her incense with her palm and did not wince. Sensation agreed to be sensation again. The judge raised his staff. He had ended debates with a syllable, since youth. Verdict in his mouth was weather in the sky. He pronounced you guilty of refusal, of arrogance, of staking your existence outside the court of man. The floor did not catch the word. Sentences required jurisdiction. He struck his staff upon stone to summon the old thunder. It always kept, and the sound arrived softer than apology. The judge looked at the staff as if it had betrayed him. The staff looked at the judge as if it had never promised to be anything but wood. He lowered it gently, like setting down a burden too heavy to carry. The merchant weighed contracts by eye and saw deficits. His calculation was a predator that had never missed. He offered trades that no one could refuse and was startled to discover refusal that did not laugh, did not sneer, did not need to prove itself clever. He raised the price of compliance, and the cost fell through his hands like a coin with 2 holes. Profit depends on gravity. He found himself in a room where gravity visited by invitation only. He folded his ledger closed and pressed it flat. The prophet of control sang a line meant to settle spines. The strategist arranged 10 invisible moves to arrive at one inevitable result. The priest lifted a ritual that had made fear kneel. The silent one, 12th among them, stepped to the very edge of your presence and waited for his advantage to appear, as it always did, where language rests its head. And then, what had been occurring, one by one, occurred together. The prophet's chant forgot its rhythm. The strategist's 10th move ate the first. The priest's ritual bowed its own head instead of yours. The silent one heard a silence not his, and understood a thing no master of control should understand. Quiet can belong to someone else. None of them faltered dramatically. No flames, no collapse of pillars. Their mastery failed the way mornings fail to be night, by refusing to change the fact of what already is. Sweat gathered, breaths lost rhythm, hands opened to show they were empty. One master sat, then another, as if the chairs had been waiting to collect attacks in posture. 12 arrived as weather. They became people again. The rulers forgot to pretend calm. Fingers that had signed empires tapped the table for a rhythm they could not find. They looked at you as men look at a horizon that refuses to curve, in the corners. Attendants did not move. Attendants sense unraveling before rulers admit it. No one spoke the word defeat. It was unnecessary. Defeat prefers to be counted in the ways a room breathes. The torches guttered once and steadied. Your shadow did not lengthen. Their certainty shortened enough to be measured by the width of a knuckle. And through all of it, you remained as you arrived. Unarmed, unarguing, unamazed. Presence does not celebrate victory over control. It simply declines to be consumed. The first crack had become a circle, and the circle had become a mirror in which 12 masters saw themselves without their habits, one by one, and then all at once. Mastery remembered it was theater. The play ended. The audience did not applaud. The actors stood on stage and realized there was no stage. What began as a crack became an unraveling. The rulers had summoned 12 titans, convinced their combined presence would bend you. But one after another faltered, voice lost, maps twisted, chants unraveling. It was no longer the failure of one, no longer the weakness of two. It was a pattern, and patterns terrify rulers more than rebellion. For rebellion can be suppressed, but patterns rewrite the rules beneath suppression. The serpent rubbed her throat, her composure gone. The general murmured about horizons that betrayed geometry. The mystic clutched her bowl as if water might forgive her. The judge lowered his staff like a child's broken toy, and the merchant pressed his ledger closed. Numbers fleeing him like shadows at dawn. The counselors shifted, gripping their armrests tighter, realizing this was not error, but law. Mastery itself was unraveling. The strategist, who had never lost, tried to anchor the group. He barked instructions, drawing invisible lines in the air, demanding the others follow his pattern. But the pattern folded. His 10th move devoured his first. His flawless logic bent into nonsense. His voice grew desperate, higher pitched, and when he looked around the circle, he saw not 12 allies, not 12 masters, but 12 frightened human beings realizing that every tool they had spent a lifetime sharpening was now dust in their hands. The prophet of control, once steady as iron, sang louder, trying to reclaim rhythm. His chant was supposed to grip spines, to steady breath, to enslave will. Instead, his voice cracked. His rhythm lost the beat. He clutched his throat, horrified, as silence devoured his song. The priest lifted his rituals, recited words that had bound people in fear, and watched the words bend in midair like reeds in wind. Belief bent its ear, but not to him, the silent one, the most feared. The 12th took one step closer, hoping stillness would crown him, but he froze, because for the first time he met a silence not his own, and he knew instantly his silence was counterfeit. Panic rippled. The masters exchanged glances not of superiority, but of dread. They had never stood in the same room as failure before. Now failure stalked them like prey. Their certainty dissolved. Their mastery betrayed them. And still, you said nothing. You did nothing. You simply were. Presence had unmade what decades of practice had built. The rulers, pale now, whispered among themselves, scrambling for explanations, exhaustion, trickery, coincidence. But their excuses rang thin. They had seen the surgeon falter. They had seen the serpent choke. They had seen the strategist undone by his own flawless logic. No lie could contain what presence had already spoken in silence. The 12 sat in their seats, shoulders heavy, breathing ragged. They had entered as masters of control. They remained as witnesses of unraveling, and unraveling does not require permission. It requires only truth. It was the 12th who understood first, not the cleverest, not the loudest. The one who had always trusted silence to do his conquering. He stepped to the boundary of your presence and waited for the world to behave the way it always had. Breath tightening, wills shrinking, rooms bowing. But the room did not bow. Breath did not obey him. Wills did not dim. He felt, with the clarity of an edge at his own throat, that his quiet was counterfeit and yours was origin. That single recognition faded through the circle like dye in clear water. The others felt it too without language. Their mastery had never been mastery. It was choreography taught to obedient air, and the air had found a new teacher. The strategist made one last diagram in the dust with his heel, the move he kept for legends and titans, an elegant trap that closed from every direction at once. The dust did not remember the line. It softened, then forgot, as if the future had decided to be elsewhere. He stared at the floor with the bewilderment of a ruler who misplaces a century. The prophet of control inhaled deep and let his chant fall in a single, immaculate rope meant to bind the spirit of the crowd. The rope unspooled into thread, then into nothing. The syllables refused to grip a reality that would not consent. He pressed his hands to his chest as if searching for the old keyhole. There was only doorless wood. The priest lifted his ritual, the one that made fear bend. His hands remembered the motions. His mouth remembered the order. But order itself grew shy and would not stand beside him. He traced a circle and found it was an ellipse that would not admit its own name. He spoke an oath and heard it change tense halfway through the sentence. He closed his book without closing it and lowered his head, learning the taste of prayers that returned to sender. The general, proud even in bewilderment, summoned a last approach from the map inside his skull. Columns, flanks, feints. He sent them forward and watched them step politely to either side of your shadow, the way rivers split around a stone. His cane tapped once more, not in command, like a traveler locating ground. The mystic searched the water for an answer, expecting a sky that told secrets. The water offered only water. She laughed once, a small, astonished sound, like rediscovering rain. It does not owe me, she said, half sorrow, half relief, and tipped the bowl back to the earth. The scholar removed his spectacles, wiped glass that was already clean, opened his book to the definition of control, and found pages describing weather, gravity, music, seasons, things that do not ask permission. He shut the cover and let the weight of it rest on his palms, the way a person carries the body of an idea that served until it didn't. The judge rose to deliver one last verdict out of habit, found his staff undecided, and sat without speaking. The merchant computed the price of surrender and discovered numbers that refused to arrange themselves into debt. Profit cannot command a presence that does not trade. He folded the ledger, then folded his hands with it. The saint with the knife heart attempted a benediction to disguise the chain. His blessing would not bend into a loop. It flew true and did not return. He understood, suddenly and too late, that mercy not owned becomes an edge against the owner. He pressed his lips together and kept the sting. The serpent, humiliated by the memory of her breath returning to her face, tried the simplest of all constrictions, naming. She selected a word that had crushed many, fragile. It floated an inch, tasted your air, and fell at her feet like a withered reed. She pronounced another, arrogant. It did not travel. Another, deluded. It wilted before it left her mouth. She reached for silence, found only yours, and lowered her gaze. The surgeon of minds, first to falter and last to accept, stepped forward once with empty hands. There is nothing to cut. He confessed to no one in particular, and the admission landed with the soft authority of law. No horn sounded. No pillar fell. Their ending arrived in small obediences, a hand unclenched. A voice chose not to continue. A presence stopped rehearsing its performance. Parferning. The 12 remained standing until they realized standing was a performance meant for rooms that still believed in them. One by one they sat. Not in defeat's theatrics, but in defeat's honesty. The rulers watched their champions become citizens. Their tools become gestures. Their certainties become questions that would not find listeners. Panic had run its course. The body cannot panic forever. It learns, finally, to recognize an atmosphere that will not be negotiated with someone. No one would later agree who whispered, "What are you?" You did not answer because the world you inhabit does not format itself as answers. Questions are hooks that require mouths. Your silence offered no place to latch. The chamber understood in a single, shared breath that this was the end of a language and the beginning of weather. Control was a dialect. Presence was climate. And climates do not lose. They are. An attendant near the wall wept quietly into the sleeve of a shirt that had survived 3 owners. Not from fear, from relief. He had lived under the 12's version of order, a tightness that called itself safety. The room today felt like the outside of a city after rain. The dust settled, the edges softer, the air unarmed. He did not need theology to know the difference between a leash and a horizon. He kept his eyes down and kept the moment for later. The rulers made a final attempt at royal posture. Fingers found their rings, shoulders found their angles. But posture is theater too, and theaters close when the audience discovers landscape. They signed nothing. They decreed nothing. They dismissed no one. The meeting adjourned itself. The torches stopped pretending to be suns and returned to being embers. 12 masters had entered as definitions. They left as men and women who now knew the cost of mistaking habit for law. You neither welcomed them nor sent them away. You let presence do what presence does. Erase the imaginary lines humans draw to convince themselves that air owes them obedience. Outside, the city continued its ordinary miracles. Bread rising, carts groaning, bells testing their own echoes. Inside, a legend finished its sentence. Everyone collapsed. Outside the chamber, the world waited for news of triumph. The rulers had promised a spectacle, the end of a legend, the unraveling of a presence that had defied them too long. They had sent in their finest, their most feared, the 12 who bent nations like reeds. And yet when the doors creaked open, no triumphant march followed, no victory speech rose from the ashes. Only silence emerged. And silence told the truth louder than any declaration. The first attendant to glimpse inside carried the story. He had seen the surgeon staring at empty hands, the serpent unable to lift her eyes, the general murmuring of horizons gone crooked, the prophet clutching a voice that no longer obeyed him. He whispered to another, and another whispered to a crowd. And soon the city breathed the verdict in unison. They all collapsed. No detail was needed. Collapse was enough. The phrase repeated in markets, in halls, in gathering places. 12 had entered, masters without equal. 12 had been unmade, stripped not by armies or battles, but by silence too heavy to resist. People asked how. The answer never came. Because answers are smaller than truths. The collapse itself was explanation. The rulers scrambled to contain it. They drafted proclamations, claimed illness, exhaustion, treachery. But the people had seen the 12 walk in strong and leave hollow. Lies could not repaint the hollow in their eyes. When masters lose mastery, rumor becomes scripture, and scripture spreads faster than decree. By nightfall, fires glowed in quiet reverence across the city. Not in celebration. No, celebration is noisy. These were fires of recognition. Elders spoke it with awe. Leaders repeated it with disbelief. 12 entered. 12 collapsed. It was too simple to deny, too heavy to ignore. And you, silent, unchanged, walked through the streets as if nothing had happened. Yet every step echoed like prophecy. You had not clashed them. You had not claimed their defeat, but defeat had claimed them. And the world now carried your silence like a crown it could not remove. From that day forward, the phrase became legend. In taverns, it was whispered with respect. In temples, it was feared like judgment. In courts, it was avoided like shadow. It became a rhyme in the mouths of the young. 12 went in, none came out the same. Generations would remember it not as history, but as law. Because when even the masters of control collapse, there is no control left, only presence, only silence, only the unshakable truth that what cannot be bent will not be broken. And so the record closed. 12 entered, 12 collapsed, and silence won. Only the unshakable truth that what cannot be bent will not be broken. And so the record closed.